Hey everybody, I'm Jacob Kelly, an extension agent in Southwest Alabama on the commercial horticulture team, and today I'm going to be talking about managing weeds in a citrus orchard. All right, folks, let's get started. Weeds pose significant challenges to citrus orchards, particularly in newly planted blocks. They compete with younger trees for water, space, nutrients, light, fungicides, which can directly reduce our growth and yield. Look at this picture on the bottom right hand of your screen. You'll see a citrus orchard. This is not a newly planted citrus orchard. It is a stressed out citrus orchard, and it's because the grass grows right up to the base of that plant and is basically holding it back. And if this person had used appropriate weed control and mitigated these mostly grasses around their trees, then their trees might be more full and capable of producing a nice crop load, which is easy to sell, high quality fruit and things like that. On top of all that, on top of smothering the plants and stealing nutrients and vying for space and all of that, weeds can be a host for insects, particularly thrips or whiteflies. They tend to like various different types of weeds and will just hang out on them if they're available. If they're not available, then they may not be there, or they may all be on your citrus tree, so your spray is more effective. Diseases go the same way. Weeds are under your trees are going to hold more moisture, which is going to make that a nice happy home for those plant pathogens to live and spread and keep reproducing. It's going to keep the humidity in the canopy humid for longer. So those leaves are going to stay wet for longer, which is going to make it easier for that disease to not only spread but reproduce. So we want to avoid weeds directly under the canopy for sure. And we want to avoid weeds around our irrigation system. I've been to a couple of sites where rodents have gotten in during a drought and chewed up spaghetti tubing, chewed up drip irrigation, to try to get to water, and they were able to do that because they had a nice cover of weeds to hide under and hide behind. If they are out in the open, they don't like being out in the open, so if they don't have anything to hide behind, they're a lot less likely to get in there and cause trouble. But on top of that, weeds are going to interfere with a lot of our other practices. They're going to get in the way of irrigation by not only stealing water, but maybe impeding water. They could block emitters from spraying appropriately, which might cause a plant to show drought stress when you've been watering it, but there's a weed blocking the water. So it's not getting to that citrus tree where you need it to get. And this can pose a huge problem for frost protection. If we're using irrigation for frost protection, we need all that water to be hitting that tree in the graft union or wherever we're going to put it, and it needs to be effective. And so weeds can block that. Weeds can also decrease the temperature in that canopy and around that citrus tree by about 5 or 6 degrees, which can be the difference between you having fruit one year and not having fruit, or your plant surviving or not surviving. So that's kind of a big deal. Bare ground releases more radiation heat than ground covered with weeds. Weeds are going to intercept fertilizer and rob your citrus trees of that. They could block a lime application if they're thick enough. They're definitely going to interfere with spraying, whether it's an insecticide or a fungicide or some other crop protectant. And they can be troublesome, especially vines during pruning. And they can also get in the way during harvest events. So we want to make sure our ground is as weed-free as possible so that we can grow the highest quality fruit that our state has to offer and really be able to compete out there in those markets. All right, so some considerations when we're planning a weed management program. Growers should consider several key factors before they get started. Orchard age is one of the most important factors. Young orchards tend to experience much higher weed pressure because more sunlight is reaching the soil surface. Those trees haven't built out that canopy yet. They're also more sensitive to certain herbicides, so product choice is important, and application rates may need to be adjusted, and typically we need to use spray guards on those young orchards. Mature orchards generally experience less weed pressure due to that denser canopy. It just creates quite a bit of shade, pretty dense shade, and reduces weed germination. Because of this, our herbicide strategies often differ between young and established blocks. Herbicide labels also play a role in product selection. Some products labeled for citrus are only for non-bearing citrus, meaning that they can only be used when there's no fruit or fruit will not be harvested within the next year. Other herbicides are labeled for specific citrus types. For example, it might be labeled for Satsuma mandarin but not for lemons, so it would be illegal to spray that product on lemons. Soil type is another consideration, as certain herbicides cannot be applied to sandy soils or coarse soils, or you might use a different rate for sandy or coarse soils. Site conditions also matter. Orchards near bodies of water or ditches or public areas may face restrictions on which products they can use. Growers must consider the specific weed species present as well, since herbicides differ in their ability to control grasses, broadleaf weeds, and sedges. And finally, the type of equipment available can influence product choice and application methods. Ensuring that the herbicide you choose and the equipment match the orchard's needs and help improve coverage, reduce risk, and maintain effective control. All right, so monitoring and scouting. We want to get ahead of weeds before they become established. That's one of the most effective and most economical approaches to managing weeds. All right, and so this requires prioritizing problem areas, scouting regularly, making timely herbicide applications, and occasionally hand pulling weeds when necessary. All right, so consistent monitoring allows growers to identify weeds when they're small and gives them time to make management decisions. Young weeds are by far easier to control and have not yet produced flowers and seed, which helps prevent long-term infestations. So if you can get them while they're young, you have better success. So scouting should not only include the tree row or the row middles, but also ditches, roadsides, orchard perimeters, and even adjacent off-site properties where weeds may spread from. You never know what your neighbor's got going on over there. Some weeds should be prioritized because of their difficulty to manage, like horseweed or pigweed. They can be particularly challenging as there are some that are glyphosate resistant, and that can make them hard to eliminate. Kogan grass is another one. It spreads rapidly and can only be reliably managed with timely applications of glyphosate or imazapyr, making early detection absolutely critical. Sedges can quickly become persistent if you leave them alone and allow them to establish. And then there's vines that can grow in the shaded areas of your trees, and there's limited herbicide options for those. A lot of hand pulling with vines. In weed management, the old saying holds true: an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Weed management options are diverse, and there's all kinds of tools we have in our toolbox, and we should utilize as many of those as possible to have a well-rounded approach and weed management plan. Preventative is where we should spend a good deal of our time. That involves scouting and monitoring, but it also involves sanitation. We want to make sure that our equipment is clean if we're moving it back and forth between orchards or growing areas. We want to make sure that we're clean, that our boots are clean, we're not tracking any weed seeds back and forth or plant pathogens for that matter. And we want to make sure that we treat our most problematic areas last. And we go through those at the end of the day or at the end of whatever we're doing, so we don't track in weed seeds from that area and spread them around the rest of our orchard. That would be a big problem. So we want to avoid that and keep everything clean as possible. If we do have a problem arise, we can spot spray, and that can save us a lot of time and money if we hit it early, before it becomes established and before it becomes a big problem. And worst case scenario, you may have to pull some weeds by hand, especially some of these invasives and things like that herbicides tend to have trouble helping us get rid of. But it takes very little time to get out there and hand pull, and it's quite effective. We actually did a trial at the Ornamental Research Station down here in Mobile where we hand pulled one side of a bed and we used herbicide on the other side of the bed, and the side that we hand pulled tended to be less weedy years after that project. So hand pulling has its place if you've got the labor and the time to do it. I understand not everybody's got that possibility. There's also mechanical ways of getting rid of weeds. The old tried and true would be tillage, which would be okay in a young orchard. That first couple of years, we can get away with some tillage on the edges of the beds to reduce the weeds trying to grow into those beds. But after that plant gets 3, 4, 5 years old, it's going to start sending out feeder roots to the edges of the bed and beyond. And when we come through with that tillage, it's going to start causing those roots to develop wounds. It's going to tear them up a little bit, and that's a good opportunity for Phytophthora or another root-borne disease to get in there, or a root insect to get in there and cause problems. So it's not a long-term solution for citrus orchards, but one that you could utilize in a young planting. Mowing is always a great option for your row middles and adjacent areas. We want to mow regularly and not allow any of those weeds or plants to produce seed heads so that we don't spread weeds while we're mowing. We want to just mow vegetative stuff and keep it low so it doesn't interfere with any of our other orchard activities. There's always the herbicide option, and it's a good tool to have. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about pre-emergence and post-emergence later, but they're great tools to have in the toolbox. One thing I don't see a lot of growers using is mulches. Mulching is not very popular in citrus orchards in Alabama, and it's because it takes a lot of labor, and it can be very expensive to spread mulch out around your orchard. And if it's an organic mulch like pine bark, pine straw, pecan shells, whatever, it's going to degrade, and which is a good thing. We want it to degrade because that's going to increase the organic matter, which is going to increase nutrient retention and things like that. But we've got to replace it pretty regularly, almost annually. So it is a great option, but there's also other options out there like geotextile fabrics, where it's an interwoven plastic fabric we can lay out, and it's a weed mat, so it's going to prevent weeds in the growing area underneath the canopy and reduce the amount of herbicides we have to use around those plants, which is always going to reduce the amount of stress that they're under and increase overall quality. Not to say that pine bark and pine straw and pecan shells are not a great option, because they are. They're just different, a different option than geotextile fabrics. So if you got a pecan grower nearby, don't hesitate to reach out and say, hey, can I use those shells that you've already gotten all the pecans out of? I'd like to use it for mulch. And they might give it to you for free. You'd be taking it off their hands. There's also newer technologies that are in research right now that I'm kind of excited about, and hopefully it's something we can use in the future. They're sprayable paper-based mulches. So you would have a spray tank and a nozzle, and you would just basically spray this stuff at the base of the plant, just like any mulch, and it's going to help prevent weeds and retain moisture and all those great and wonderful things, and it's made out of old newsprint. And so that's a great option that hopefully we'll all be using a little bit more of in the future. And cover cropping. Cover cropping your row middles is, to me, a no-brainer. We'd like to use a crop that's not going to compete very much with our citrus trees. I like centipede grass because it's low maintenance, and we can control where it grows with different herbicides. It's not a broadleaf, but you could also use some nitrogen-fixing legumes like low-growing clovers and things like that to help suppress weeds and fix nitrogen from the air into those nodules underneath the roots of those things. And your citrus trees will be able to grab that nitrogen as those roots and nodules decay over time. So it's a really good option. Here is a picture of a grower that uses geotextile fabric. He likes it a lot. It reduces his reliance on herbicide under his plants, and he likes the way it works, a lot less weeding for him. And here's another picture of a research station in Florida. I recently went to the Cold Hardy Citrus Group's conference there, annual meeting, and they demoed this geotextile fabric. What they did is they took a plastic bed laying machine that we'd use in plasticulture like in vegetables, and they laid down some plastic and built a raised bed and started growing citrus in that. And I think that's a great idea, and it's a great way to suppress weeds and manage water and all these great and wonderful things. And so it may be an option for you, it may not be, but I wanted to put all the tools out there just in case you wanted to use any of them. All right, so when we're using herbicides, we need to consider both our orchard age and the specific weeds present. And it's important to clearly define our weed management goals and create a plan or a schedule that's realistic to maintain throughout the year. Growers should know exactly what each herbicide controls, how that product works, whether or not it's a pre-emergent or a post-emergent, if it's selective or non-selective, if it's a contact herbicide or systemic. All these things are important, and they should also know the group number that that herbicide falls in. We want to rotate group numbers so that we don't continuously spray a weed with the same herbicide and it becomes resistant, because then we've got a bigger problem on our hands. And it's not uncommon to tank mix different modes of action to get better efficacy out of these products. So that might be something you want to try, and a lot of times it'll tell you on the label whether or not that product is compatible with other products. So that's something to look at when you're out there looking for herbicides and developing a management plan. So there's all kinds of options available for preventing weed emergence, and selecting the right one begins with reading and understanding the herbicide label. Labels change over time, and active ingredients may vary depending on the product version. It's important for the grower to keep up with that information. It's their responsibility to stay current on any of these changes that may happen. And remember that the label is the law. And using products off-label can lead to crop injury, environmental issues, legal consequences, so we want to avoid all that at all possible. When used correctly and applied at the right time, herbicides, especially pre-emergent products, are highly effective tools, and pre-emergent herbicides work by forming a treated layer in the soil, almost like a boundary. As the weed seeds germinate, they hit that boundary layer of herbicide and they die before they're able to emerge. So these products are especially effective when paired with like a burn down post-emergent product. You would come in with your post-emergent product, burn down the ground, and then you're able to apply your pre-emergent product, and it has direct contact with the soil, and that's when it's going to be most effective. So let's go over these 4 examples of pre-emergent herbicides that you can use in a citrus situation. The first one I'm going to talk about is Allion, and the active ingredient is indaziflam. We can use it on that first year of after planting, but we want to be very cautious. All right, we can only use it 1 month after planting potted plants. If we do bare root plants and we spray Allion, it's going to cause us a lot of problems. And the soil needs to be settled. And I really think you're taking a risk when you're using Allion that first year, you definitely want to make sure you protect your plants, especially any green material, the trunks and things like that. Don't need to come in contact with Allion, and the roots don't really need to come in contact with it. If it were me, I would wait till after year one, but the label does indicate that you can spray 1 month after planting on these potted plants, and you will have some control. It's a very awesome product. It works really well at preventing any annual grasses or broadleaf weeds, and we can continue to use it year after year. It's a really good one to alternate with Chateau, which is below it, which also controls annual grasses and weeds, both of which we can use on bearing trees, with Allion having the pre-harvest interval of 7 days, and Chateau having a pre-harvest interval of 3 days. Chateau can also be used in year one planting, but we need to make sure we protect those trees. With all these products, we need to protect those trees from year one to about year 3, and then after that, we can kind of lay off the spray guards and things like that. We won't need them as much. The next product I'm going to talk about is Surfland. It can be used in year one planting, and it can be used on bearing trees. It also helps control annual grasses and broadleaf weeds, and it's a different group number, and that's something that we want to do, is we want to rotate group numbers. That's the mode of action, how they kill the weed. If we keep using the same product over and over again, these weeds are going to get wise, and they're going to become resistant, and then we got a big problem on our hands. So we want to rotate our products regularly. And Allion and Chateau are great products to rotate, but you can rotate any of these. You can rotate all 4 if you wanted to. Solacam is a good product. We can use it on year one planting with protection. We can use it on bearing trees. It's got a longer pre-harvest interval of 30 days, but it's going to help with our annual grasses and broadleaf weeds, and it's going to suppress perennial grasses as well as nutsedge. So it's a good one to have in the holster as far as tools go for pre-emergence. And our post-emergent herbicides are used to control weeds that have already emerged and are actively growing. And most of these products work best when weeds are healthy and not drought stressed and have some true leaves on them. So we want at least a couple inches of growth before we use most of these. But a lot of these are going to be familiar to you. If they're not, then I get to introduce you to them. Roundup glyphosate is probably the most widely used herbicide in the world, and it's because it's so effective. It's very safe, it's very effective, it's probably our safest herbicide we have, and it's systemic, so if you only spray it on one leaf, it's going to work through that leaf and work its way down to the roots to help kill that plant. And it's non-selective, so you can spray it on pretty much anything herbaceous and it will kill it. It's a group 9. Rely 280 is glufosinate. It's a contact herbicide, so if I spray a part of a plant, it will kill that part of the plant. It won't kill another part of the plant. So if you accidentally mess up and get part of your citrus tree, it won't completely kill the whole plant. It'll just kill that limb. I'm not saying it won't stress that plant out, and that plant won't have problems later on, but it won't kill it completely. You've kind of saved yourself. But glufosinate works well. It's a good burn down, quick burn down, and it's non-selective well and a group 9. AMEC carfentrazone is a contact herbicide similar to glufosinate. It's non-selective and it's a group E. Active ingredient cethoxidime is systemic and it works really well on annual and perennial grasses. It's a group 1, so if you got grasses in your orchard under your trees, you can use Post or Fusilade DX, fluazepop, and they both work very similarly. Post cethoxidime is going to be a group 1, fluazepop and Fusilade are going to be a group 1A. And Trevix, which is ceflufinicil, is a systemic herbicide that works well on broadleaf weeds, and you can use it under your trees, and it works really effectively on those broadleaf weeds. It's a group 14. All right, folks, that wraps us up. Remember that effective weed management in citrus is not about relying on a single tool. It's about a balanced, consistent, and informed approach. Prevention, scouting, sanitation set the foundation. Mechanical, cultural, and chemical strategies each play a role, and the most successful programs use all of these together. Understanding your orchard, its age, its soil type, tree sensitivity, the types you have out there, weeds present, that's all going to help guide you in your selection of the right herbicide for you and the application timing. Whether you're using pre-emergence or post-emergence or both, always follow the label and protect those young trees. It's very important, especially with Allion. We want to make sure that we protect that tree and not get any of that product on the roots of that tree or on any green tissue, or it's going to cause us problems. Remember, weeds can reduce yield, create habitat for pest and disease, and overall increase production cost if they're around. So we want to mitigate that the best we can. I appreciate you spending some time with us. Thank you for watching this video, and please reach out if you need any help or have any questions about citrus production. Be sure to go to our site, aces.edu, for more information about citrus and agriculture in general. We do all kinds of stuff. So come by and see us. We'd be happy to hear from you. Y'all take care.